May 3rd, 2026. Gorak Shep, Nepal, 16,942 feet above sea level. A veteran Sherpa guide adjusts his pack and begins the short walk toward Everest Base Camp. 30 expeditions, a 2017 Everest summit, 6 Makalu summits. This is just another morning at the start of the season. He sets off across the moraine. 7 days later, on the same mountain, May 10th, the Khumbu Icefall. A 35-year-old climber moves upward through one of the most dangerous places on Earth. He is the first person from Nepal's Dalit community to ever summit Everest. He has stood on top of the world 4 times. This is just another acclimatization rotation. Both men had given everything to this mountain. Both had survived its worst conditions more times than they could count. What happens next would shock the entire climbing world. From a quiet walk below base camp to a medical emergency deep inside the Khumbu Icefall. These are the first 2 Everest deaths of 2026. Welcome to Tourist Tragedies. Viewer discretion is advised. To understand what happened to Lakpa Dende Sherpa, you have to understand who he was. He was born in Gudel, a small village in the Solukhumbu district of Nepal, the same region that has produced more elite high-altitude guides than anywhere else on Earth. From the time he was young, the mountains were not a hobby. They were a livelihood, a calling, and eventually a career that would span more than 2 decades. Lakpa was not a weekend trekker who worked his way up the ranks. He was not a recreational climber chasing bucket list peaks. He was not a tourist guide leading groups to lower altitude viewpoints. He was a professional high-altitude worker in the truest sense, the kind of man that expedition teams depend on to survive. By 2026, he had participated in 30 expeditions across Nepal since 2001. He had summited Everest in 2017. He had stood on top of Manaslu in 2016. And between 2008 and 2025, he had reached the summit of Makalu, one of the world's 14 8,000ers, 6 separate times. 6. Most climbers spend their entire lives attempting Makalu once. This season, he was working with 7 summit treks, supporting the Indo-Tibetan Border Police Everest expedition. It was early May. The season was just beginning. He was healthy, experienced, and exactly where he was supposed to be. At 51 years old, Lakpa Dende Sherpa was at the peak of a long and decorated career. He had the mountain knowledge that only comes from a lifetime of hard work at extreme altitude. He had every reason to believe this season would be like every other one before it. May 3rd, 2026 was supposed to be a straightforward morning. The route from Gorak Shep to Everest Base Camp is one of the most walked paths in the entire Himalayan region. Every year, thousands of trekkers make this exact journey, a short but demanding stretch across the Khumbu Glacier moraine, climbing from 16,942 feet at Gorak Shep to 17,500 feet at base camp. For an experienced high-altitude worker like Lakpa Dende, this was not a climb. This was a commute. But there is something about this route that most people don't fully appreciate until they are on it. At that altitude, your body is already operating in a different world. The air contains roughly half the oxygen available at sea level. Every step costs more than it should. Your heart works harder, your lungs pull deeper, your blood thickens. And even for someone who has done this dozens of times, the Khumbu Glacier moraine is not a forgiving place. The terrain is unstable, a shifting, uneven landscape of rock, ice, and glacial debris that demands constant attention. One moment of inattention, one stumble, one sudden drop in blood pressure, and the mountain does not care how many times you have been here before. Early May also marks the beginning of the main Everest climbing window, and 2026 was already shaping up to be one of the most complicated seasons in recent memory. A large, unstable serac, a tower of glacial ice roughly 100 feet tall, had blocked the Khumbu Icefall route above base camp for weeks, delaying the opening of the route and putting the entire season on edge. Expedition teams were anxious. Route fixers were working under pressure, and support staff across every team were moving faster than usual, trying to make up for lost time. Lakpa was on his way to base camp to begin work for the season. He was traveling on the lower approach, below the icefall, below the technical danger zone, on a path that climbers and workers use so routinely that it barely registers as dangerous. He had a pack on his back. He had the experience of 30 expeditions behind him. He set off from Khumbu Icefall that morning with no indication that anything was wrong. Somewhere on the path, at approximately 17,000 feet, Lakpa Dende Sherpa lost consciousness. He fell, and he did not get up. The exact sequence of what happened in those final moments is still not fully known. Expedition Liaison Officer Gyanendra Shrestha later told reporters that Lakpa had fallen while on his way to base camp and died at around 5,200 meters. Sources connected to 7 summit treks told Outside Magazine that they believed he appeared to have died of natural causes, a medical event, not a fall caused by a technical error or unstable terrain. Nepal police opened an investigation, but no confirmed autopsy conclusion had been made public at the time of this video. What that means in practice is this: a 51-year-old man with 30 expeditions, 6 Makalu summits, and a 2017 Everest ascent to his name, collapsed on one of the easiest stretches of trail in the entire Everest approach. Not in the icefall, not above Camp Y, not in the death zone, but on a walk that trekkers with no high-altitude experience complete every single day. The cruelest detail is the location itself. Adventure Mountain noted that the final Khumbu Icefall to base camp section is not usually considered technically difficult. There were no seracs overhead. There was no technical climbing involved. There was no objective hazard that anyone could point to and say, that is what killed him. He simply stopped. His body was recovered and brought down to Lukla on the same day, May 3rd. It was later transported to his home village in Gudol Solukhumbu, the same village where he had grown up, the same village that had watched him build a career that most climbers could only dream of. Under Nepali law, his family was entitled to a $15,000 insurance claim, a number that reflects both the formal protections in place for mountain workers and the brutal reality of what those protections are actually worth when measured against a life. Lakpa Dende Sherpa was 51 years old. He had spent more than half his life serving the mountain that ultimately took him. He left behind a family, a community, and a record of service that stretched back 25 years. The climbing world noted his passing. Tributes were posted. His expedition record was cited. And then, as it always does at the start of the Everest season, the mountain kept moving. Teams kept acclimatizing. The route fixers kept working through the icefall. And 7 days later, someone else would die. But before we get to that, there is a question that doesn't have a clean answer, and it matters. How does a man who has walked this exact route more times than most people have climbed a flight of stairs collapse and die on a clear May morning below base camp, on ground that poses no technical challenge to anyone? Was it his heart? Was it altitude, even at a level his body had long since adapted to? Was it something that had been building quietly for years, invisible against the backdrop of a career that looked, from the outside, like pure resilience? I don't know, and the investigation as of now doesn't give us a definitive answer either. But here is what we know about the human body at 17,000 feet. Even for someone who has spent years at extreme altitude, the Khumbu region is not neutral ground. The body never fully acclimatizes above a certain threshold. It only tolerates. Blood thickens. The heart compensates. The risk of sudden cardiac events rises with every 1,000 feet of elevation, regardless of fitness, regardless of experience, regardless of how many times you have been there before. Doctors who study high-altitude medicine have documented cases of experienced climbers and guides suffering acute cardiac events on terrain far easier than what they had previously survived. The mountain does not reward loyalty. There is also something else worth considering. Lakpa Dende had been working at high altitude for 25 years, 30 expeditions, hundreds of days above base camp across his career. And the research on long-term high-altitude workers is not entirely reassuring. Studies have shown that repeated prolonged exposure to low-oxygen environments can cause structural changes to the heart and lungs over time, changes that build slowly, quietly, invisibly, until one morning they are not invisible anymore. Was that what happened to Lakpa? Did 25 years of service to these mountains eventually extract their price on a walk he had done 100 times? Or was it something else entirely? A one-time event, unpredictable and unpreventable, that could have happened to anyone on any mountain on any morning? The investigation is open. The autopsy results have not been publicly confirmed. His exact cause of death, as of now, remains officially undetermined. I don't know what killed Lakpa Dende Sherpa, and that uncertainty is uncomfortable because a man with his experience and record deserves a better answer than silence. But here is what that question does not account for. What happens when the climber is young, fit, and does everything right, and the mountain still takes him? What happened to this next man may introduce another theory about what was really happening to Lakpa Dende that morning. May 10th, 2026, the Khumbu Icefall, Nepal. If you had been standing in the Khumbu Icefall at 4 in the morning on May 10th, you would have seen a man moving through a landscape that looks like the end of the world. Towers of glacial ice the size of apartment buildings looming in every direction, the temperature well below freezing, no sunlight, just headlamps cutting through the dark, and the constant low sound of a glacier that never stops moving, never stops shifting, never stops threatening to come apart. Bijay Ghimire Bishwakarma had been here before, 4 times on the summit of Everest. 4 times he had passed through this exact stretch of ice and come out the other side. He was 35 years old, fit, and experienced in a way that most climbers his age could only aspire to. But Bijay's story is not just a climbing story. He was the first person from Nepal's Dalit community. The Bishwakarma caste, historically among the most marginalized in Nepali society, to ever summit Everest. In a sport and an industry where your family name and your community's resources shape your opportunities from birth, Bijay had climbed to the literal top of the world and done it 4 times. He was working this season with Tag Nepal treks and expeditions, moving through the icefall on a standard acclimatization rotation, the kind of movement every serious Everest climber makes multiple times before their summit push. This was not his first time in the dark on this glacier. This was routine. The 2026 Everest season had already been one of the most tense in recent memory before a single climber had set foot above base camp. A massive unstable serac, a tower of glacial ice roughly 100 feet tall, had blocked the Khumbu Icefall route for weeks, preventing the Himalayan route fixers from opening the path to the higher camps. The Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee issued a public warning. The serac had multiple cracks and could collapse without notice. For weeks, every expedition team sat at base camp, waiting, watching, knowing that the route above them was being held hostage by a wall of ice that obeyed no schedule and answered to no one. The Icefall route finally opened on April 29th, less than 2 weeks before Bijay entered it. That context matters because it tells you what kind of season this was. Teams were behind, climbers were anxious, and the mountain felt, to many people there, like it was operating on a shorter fuse than usual. On the night of May 9th, Bijay Ghimire Bishwakarma began his acclimatization rotation, a standard movement from base camp upward through the icefall toward Camp Awais at around 19,500 feet. Every serious Everest climber does this multiple times before their summit push. You go up, you stress your body at altitude, you come back down, and you let your system adapt. It is grueling, unglamorous work. It is also essential. At approximately 4 in the morning on May 10th, somewhere between base camp and Camp 1, Bijay fell ill. The exact location descriptions and reports vary slightly. Some say he was at Camp 1, others say he was in the Icefall, others say he was near Camp 1. The Icefall and Camp I occupy the same general danger zone, and at 4 in the morning in the dark, the distinction matters less than what happened next. He collapsed. His teammates and support crew began bringing him down immediately. That is the protocol. When someone falls ill at altitude, you descend as fast as possible because altitude itself is the enemy and the only cure is lower ground. They moved him back toward base camp, but Bijay Ghimire Bishwakarma died before he got there. He was 35 years old. His body was evacuated by helicopter in Lukla. Authorities made arrangements to transport him to Tribhuvan University Teaching Hospital in Kathmandu for a post-mortem examination. District Police Office Solukhumbu. Information Officer Inspector Bikash Rai told reporters he had fallen ill at around 4 in the morning and died while being brought down. The Himalayan Times reported initial indications of cardiac arrest. Outside Magazine reported that officials did not yet know the confirmed cause, but believed it was a medical event, not a fall and not collapsing ice. That last detail is important. The serac was there. The danger was real. But it did not kill Bijay Ghimire Bishwakarma. His own body did, or more precisely, something inside his body gave way at altitude, in the dark, on a rotation he had done before, on a mountain he had summited 4 times. The first person from Nepal's Dalit community to stand on top of Everest died on his way toward it, at 35 years old, doing exactly what he was trained to do. Quick heads up, if you're enjoying these mountain stories, consider subscribing and you'll be the first to see them. 2 men, 7 days apart, the same mountain, both dying of suspected medical events, not falls, not ice, not the objective hazards that Everest is famous for. Their own bodies gave out on them. That pattern has a name in high-altitude medicine. Dr. Peter Hackett, one of the world's leading researchers in high-altitude physiology, has written extensively about what he and colleagues call altitude-induced cardiac remodeling, a process where repeated, prolonged exposure to low-oxygen environments causes the right side of the heart to enlarge and stiffen over time. At sea level, this change is invisible. There are no symptoms, no warning signs. But at altitude, where the heart is already under enormous strain, a remodeled right ventricle has less reserve, less tolerance for sudden stress, and a significantly higher risk of catastrophic failure. For Lakpa Dende Sherpa, the math is brutal. 30 expeditions, 25 years, hundreds of days above 15,000 feet. If altitude-induced cardiac remodeling accumulates with exposure, and the research suggests it does, then Lakpa's heart may have been carrying a debt that his career had quietly built, one expedition at a time, until a routine morning walk finally called it in. For Bijay Ghimire Bishwakarma, the picture is different, but the mechanism may be the same. 35 years old, 4 Everest summits. A young man by any measure, but a young man whose heart had already been to the top of the world 4 times, and was now, at 4 in the morning, pushing through the Khumbu Icefall again. Youth is not immunity. Experience is not immunity. The altitude does not negotiate. Both men knew this mountain better than almost anyone. Both had earned the right to be there through years of hard, dangerous work, and both may have been undone not by a single catastrophic mistake, but by the slow, invisible cost of a life spent at the edge of what the human body can endure. The mountain does not keep a tab. It simply presents the bill. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. These were real people, not statistics, not cautionary tales, just 2 men who dedicated their lives to the highest mountain on Earth and never made it home from what should have been an ordinary day. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit you harder and why. If this video meant something to you, share it, and I'll see you in the next one.